Following their collision at the Austrian Grand Prix, McLaren and notably Andrea Stella unleashed furious attacks and a witch hunt on Max Verstappen, questioning his professionalism, Formula One car handling and racing skills. Could this accident cause a nasty fight throughout the second half of the season? After multiple near misses, Verstappen and Norris collided on the approach to the Turn 3 hairpin, with Norris attempting to run down the outside of the Red Bull to set up a move on the exit, and Verstappen defending. Both cars ended up with punctures. This saw Norris retiring and Verstappen finishing 5th, despite receiving a 10-second penalty since the stewards believed he was entirely to blame for the accident. McLaren team principal Andrea Stella argued Verstappen's driving was a repetition of issues from his 2021 F1 title battle with Lewis Hamilton, and that he should have been penalised harsher back then. I see it that the entire population of the world would know who is responsible except for a group of people, Stella said. But the problem behind it is that if you don't address these things honestly, they will come back. They have come back today because they were not addressed properly in the past when there were some fights with Lewis that needed to be punished in a harsher way. Like this, you learn how to race in a certain way. There were many episodes. Later, when questioned if the fact Verstappen outperformed Norris while being ruled at fault was something the FIA should consider in the future, Stella replied, "That's a tricky one. It's complex, because sometimes the outcome can be minor, sometimes it can be big like in this case. I think the 10 seconds, as a matter of fact today, was ineffective, and we have the driver that we are trying to chase in the classification gain 10 points. I said before, it's an episode which gives us a richness of cases that should be analysed and think, how do we move forward? Because we don't want to see another 2021. I thought that was not a good point in Formula One racing. It might have been entertaining, but not for good reasons. And to make things even worse, Stella believes that even if Norris had been able to pass Verstappen, he was unlikely to have sailed clear to victory, despite his strong pace at the start of the race's final stint. So Verstappen didn't even have to defend this hard. The Italian reckons that the aerodynamically efficient Red Bull would have been able to stay in DRS threat of the McLaren, and so attacked back at a later point. Even if Lando would have passed Max, it could be that Max with DRS effect, which is very large, he could have been in position to attack Lando again, Stella explained. So, actually, I think we were prevented from looking at a pretty exciting final part of the race because I am not sure Lando would have gone away. I think the fight would have gone to the checkered flag. It is a shame as we'll never know. Norris believed Verstappen had raced terribly throughout their bout. When confronted about the last encounter, he stated, "I was on the edge of the track. I don't know what else I'm meant to do." He's always been a bit like that. I respect Max a lot and what he can do and what he goes out and does every time he's on track. But there are times where he goes maybe a little bit too far, and today is a little bit of that. He ruined my race, destroyed my car, some of my best bits on the car, all for the bin, and we don't have a lot of spares in the battle that we're in. I just expected a bit more from him, that's all. Though Verstappen first labelled the penalty he received for the clash ridiculous over team radio, his post-race comments essentially categorised it as a racing incident. The move that we got together was something that I didn't expect because I saw him coming, of course. I had the front a little bit inside and then under braking we touched the rear tyres and we both got a puncture from it, which is of course something you don't want to happen, said Verstappen. Red Bull team principal Christian Horner used the term racing incident expressly and believed the punishment was a little harsh because Verstappen's race had already been damaged by the puncture that he picked up. For me, when I looked at the replay, it looked like 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, Horner elaborated. Both drivers had complained about one other's driving in the lead up to the collision, with Verstappen believing Norris was dive-bombing him and Norris being concerned by Verstappen's defensive movements in braking zones. The thing is, with that, a little bit of movement is always going to happen, Norris said, but he's completely reacting to what I was doing. And once you've committed so aggressively on the brakes, you don't leave room for getting off and allowing a bit more space in the middle of a braking zone. When you've committed, and he would move, which forced me to move, and therefore I would lock up or do something. But at every point before he moved, I was not locked up. I was not out of control. My moves were fair until I had to react to something he did in the middle of a braking zone. And I can't. You don't have grip. You're not able to, once you're on the edge, just adjust and counter these kinds of things. At the same time, if I am not able to move like I was, then we're going to have more collisions. I'm happy with what I did. I wouldn't change anything. Verstappen denied that he had been moving in braking zones. "It was not moving under braking because every time I moved I was not braking already," the driver said. "Of course, from the outside it always looks like that, but I think I know fairly well what to do in these scenarios." Also, a few of those Norris moves were really late dive bombs, so it was a bit of sending it up the inside and just hope the other guy steers out of it, which is not always how you race. But it's just the corner here lends to that as well. I've been in the other position as well when you go for it, and it's just the shape of the corner. When asked if Verstappen moved under braking, Horner replied, "Max is a hard racer and they know that." Lando was trying to make up for yesterday. You could see this building for a couple of races. It was inevitable that at some point there'd be something close between them. It looks like Camp Red Bull thinks there is actually no one to blame. However, the Papaya camp thinks otherwise, as their team boss went in on Verstappen and is questioning his professionalism. Stella said that three-time world champion Verstappen was harming his own reputation via reckless driving, like as the Norris incident. "The fact is that we have so much respect for Red Bull, so much respect for Max," he kept saying. "They don't need to do this. They don't need to do this. This is almost a way to compromise your reputation. Why would you do that?" Norris echoed the sentiment. "There are rules for what you're not allowed to do and allowed to do," he said. "He was doing things you're not allowed to do and not getting penalised. I expected a tough battle against Max. I know what to expect. I expect aggression and pushing the limits and that kind of thing, but all three times he's doing stuff which can easily cause an incident, and in a way a bit reckless. It seemed a bit desperate from his side. It doesn't need to be. He's got plenty of wins. I just expected a tough, fair, respectful, on-the-edge bit of racing, and I don't feel like that's what I got in return." In the end, as we all know, Max Verstappen and Lando Norris's first Formula One incident was unavoidable, thanks in large part to Verstappen's unwavering attitude, which occasionally leads him over the line. Two front-running drivers competing for victories are sure to collide at some time, especially if one of them is Verstappen. And while there is nothing that can influence a driver's innate attitude towards racing, McLaren team principal Andrea Stella was correct in suggesting that stronger rule enforcement may make a difference. Stella's statement that this was a result of Verstappen not receiving adequate punishment for issues with Lewis Hamilton during their 2021 title fight was one of the more eye-catching remarks of the Red Bull ring brawl aftermath. Stella also mentioned that Verstappen is under no need to do anything. "We know he dislikes losing any fight. Perhaps if he lost one or two races every now and then, he'd have fewer of these incidents and a better reputation among those who think the worst of him as a driver. But Verstappen is unlikely to care about that." You could also argue that Verstappen would not be the driver he is now if he controlled his last 1% in fight. Perhaps it is part of the same mindset that enables him to accomplish everything else so well and effectively. But it has a distinct disadvantage. Verstappen's vulnerability stems from a weakness in certain situations, specifically a protracted wheel-to-wheel battle under rising strain, especially with the RB20 being a weaker car on longer tyre management in relation to the McLaren. This sets the stage for exactly what happened in Austria and most likely other events in the future. What's your thoughts on it? Should McLaren go after Verstappen by engaging in an investigation with the FIA? Or is there no one to blame? After all, we've seen plenty of moves in Turn 3 in Austria in recent years, and some have been trickier than the Verstappen-Norris situation we saw yesterday. So what's your take on the accident? Was it a racing accident with a fair penalty to Verstappen, or is Verstappen pushing boundaries like he did in 2021 again? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.